For many people, inner peace is as elusive as world peace. My guest today, Dr. Jacqueline Sidman, is author of Instant Inner Peace. She says she has a technique that can help you find happiness. Pleasure to have you here today, Dr. Sidman.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I just want to say, I just got back from vacation in Germany. I went to the spas in Baden-Baden, and I have found inner peace.
Did you leave it there when you left, though? That's the question.
Well, I'm slowly getting back into the swing of things, so I guess it's fading away. But at one point, I felt as though I said to myself, I'd fallen into my vacation, or felt like I'd fallen off the face of the earth and just got swallowed up with my vacation, which was very relaxing.
That's what they're for.
But, and the reason I say that too, partly, is that in the beginning of the book, you quote somebody who says, most people spend 50 years of their life trying to undo the first 5.
Mm-hmm. That's
so,
true.
What's going on?
Well, what that means is it's just simply how the mind works. The mind works very much like a computer, and we all work with computers now. We've got a conscious mind here in the outside world, and it's very logical and very linear, and it knows how to dress and drive a car and do our jobs and all of that. And then we have the subconscious mind, which is just like the hard drive of the computer, and everything we've ever perceived about the world is programmed in there. And you may have heard that your personality's formed by the time you reach approximately 6 years old, and now you're doomed to deal with that information. That's just who you are. And now I've developed a system called the Sidman Solution that literally can take you back into those early learnings, which we think we're stuck there. That's it. And we change them.
The Greeks had a saying, which I think is just rings true, I think, but the child is the parent of the man.
That's the old philosophy. The Sidman Solution is different than that. What we do is we literally open the door and we follow the trail of whatever's bothering you that seem to be automatic reactive patterns that keep you stuck in behaviors or illness that you don't want, and find out that there's an emotional root cause that was set up early on when you're little and you really don't know how the world works, but you still make decisions.
Right.
And they're called successful strategies. And when that door closes, you forget where they came from, and yet your subconscious mind is still working for you, and it seems to be in control. It seems like the parent of the adult, and yet it really isn't. It's only the way the mind works. It's just like if you have a document that you want to edit, you don't yell at the screen. Okay.
You know, somebody showed me voice recognition software the other day where you can actually talk to the computer stuff. Then you can yell at the screen.
Well, I don't know if you could still change. Can you edit, though?
You actually can.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, it's getting pretty amazing.
All right. Well, so we're kind of hand in hand with this process, because by relaxing the body, relaxing the mind, and focusing, we can actually open the door to the subconscious mind. Now, how do you do that? Okay, here you have light everywhere, but we know that a laser beam can perform surgery.
Yes.
Isn't that interesting? Okay, so we have only 3, we have no magic, no tools other than your mind to work with, but there are 3 ways we store information. We store information in pictures, because we think in pictures. Okay, I mean, if you thought about your living room furniture, you could probably see it with your eyes open. Isn't that interesting? We're sitting here, but you can still see it. Okay, we also think in sound.
Yes.
So let's say you imagine a door slam. You can kind of hear it in your mind's ear, so to speak. And we also think in emotions. So things that make you laugh, you go to the movies and you giggle, and maybe the person sitting next to you, nothing, and you think, well, why aren't they laughing? Well, the thing is that they have a different memory set. They have different emotions.
Right.
Great leaders, great speakers, orators, great movies and great theater, great literature is considered great and honored because it touches people on many levels.
Right.
Right.
Right. And as you point out, in other words, people think of their lives as sort of an objective history, but yet a different person going through that same experience would have looked at it differently.
Oh yes, I have identical twins, genetically the same, but the way they interpreted the world was different.
Yep.
See, so you have your own unique set of information, and it's based on perception, not necessarily the real world around you, because the real world, as you say, they've done experiments where they'll have witnesses to a crime, and they'll say, okay, now let's report what you saw. Who saw the red jacket, and who was doing, who had the glasses on, and they get different answers. So it's perception. And so people ask me sometimes, well, is there false memory? And I said this one time. I was at a research Institute for Memory, and I just said it kind of under my breath, well, no, there's only perception. And someone said, that lady over there just won the Nobel Prize for saying that. I said, I should have said that, you know. But really, it's very profound. So what we're changing is your perception by entering the subconscious mind and then figuring out where that information came from that's holding you in those patterns.
Right, and actually, so that's a good thing, because you can change in the way you look at the world if you have, let's say, a certain slanted or maybe distorted view for whatever reasons from experiences in the childhood.
Well, yes, especially if people have had any kind of damage as children, either abuse of any nature, or they've been left behind in some way, or they feel like they're not loved, or something happens to them that's a negative memory. We're reacting the same way as we did then.
How common do you think that is? I mean, I'm often surprised, you know, partly because of doing this show maybe, but even just hearing people talk with their friends or acquaintances, you know, sometimes even you're like the big, strong, tough guy or something, or maybe even especially, you know, depending on the case, that people really carry around, well, to use the word, you know, a lot of baggage from their younger years. You know, it's amazing.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that most of the time they teach you that you can manage that baggage, and what I'm saying is that this system doesn't manage it, it releases it once and for all. And the second part of that is it installs new information that's updated based on your real understanding of how the world works. So now you're an adult, you have a much larger scope. Instead of when you were a child, you have a limited environment, you know, your family, your home, maybe school, and yet things are magnified. When you're little, something bad happens, it scares you to death, you know.
Yeah. So
and
people have internalized that, but yet you
Yes.
can change that little kid's way of looking at the world into an adult's way of
You
looking
can
at the
edit
world.
it, just like you go in and you edit the computer. It's very powerful work. So instead of carrying around that, and it's causing a lot of unwanted behaviors, like well, let's think of unwanted behaviors. People that want to lose weight, people that want to stop smoking, people that have poor relationships, people that have illness, and that illness can be have a root cause,
Right.
believe it or not.
And that's one thing that I found was interesting, because I definitely see how, let's say, something like self-esteem, how you could work with that. It's something you might think of as more of a mental aspect, but you do claim that the technique works a lot with illness, which is more physical.
Yes.
So this gets a little detailed, but on the one hand, you know, I've heard things. For instance, you may say, I think it's fairly commonly accepted there is a correlation between mental and physical, as far as, you know, you may say somebody lost the will to live, or they've done studies with cancer research that people who, you know, like laughter or positive thoughts actually helped. You know, these were scientific medical studies that those patients did better. But yet, you seem to take it a step further, though, even where you know, may say that more than just like influencing it, though, that it may be a strongly, you know, just like cure certain illnesses that people may not be aware of. So I'm assuming that's one of the more controversial aspects of the system.
Well, we hesitate to use the word cure, you know, incurable disease, but I have to tell you, there are people that come to me who have had years of seeing medical doctors and being on medications and treating the symptom, and until they got to the root cause, the problem never went away. It's just like, you know what, I had a tree in my yard, and the tree had roots that were going into my plumbing. So they cut it off at the grass. And guess what? It grew back.
Exactly.
Okay, so until they went in and took the roots out, the problem still existed. So that's what we do now with the Sidman solution, is that we literally go into and we crack the defense mechanism. And that's a pretty interesting aside, which I'd like to go into a little bit with you as well.
Sure, and I want to pick that up, but I want to ask you that. But as I say, though, you say, though, that it could deal with things such as allergies, I think cancer, heart disease, and again, in a stronger way than many people may either accept or realize or whatever. Now, I believe you said that they're doing medical research to validate that, or there have been studies to, you know, to try to kind of see if it rings true, or
yes,
what's
it's very
being done
new.
about that?
It's very new, and I consider myself a pioneer in the field. I lecture at UCI Medical Center, and their faculty, and their students, their medical students, as well as the Integrative Center, or rather the Susan Samueli Integrated Center for Integrative Medicine. And it's something that's becoming very popular with medical centers because their patients are seeking outside help. And they're not just using only, I mean, I'm not putting down the traditional medical community, because I believe in it. But this is augmenting the work, complementing the work, not instead of. So that's where I stand on that.
We'll be right back with Dr. Jacqueline Sidman, author of Instant Inner Peace, right after this. We are back with Dr. Jacqueline Sidman today, telling you how to find inner peace. So, but one thing I want to talk about a bit too, basically the technique is a form of hypnotherapy. Is that what it
It's
comes down
done
to?
in a very light, relaxed state. However, I have actually stayed a little bit away from the term hypnotherapy because a lot of people have a preconceived idea of what it is, and this is a little bit of a departure. However, my PhD is in clinical hypnotherapy, so I know what it is, and it's a very light, relaxed state. However, you remember everything, we talk just like you're talking, and it's quite amazing. People go, well, how can you get there? Well, you'd get there by, again, penetrating the defense mechanism, and only the ones you don't want. I mean,
So, by the way, how do you get there? Because you said earlier, you warned me, if you use your special voice, you might put me under. So, are you going to put us under today? Or?
only if you want to. Actually, people that go to stage shows, I'll just give you a little hint on that. The performer is just that. It's a performer, and they take volunteers, and that's the key word. And they'll usually take more than they need, and so they'll say, well, okay, thank you, you can sit down, and you can stay, and you can sit down. And the reason is they want to play. So there's no mind control, and that's huge. I mean, it's very important people understand that. So the light state of hypnosis is just that. The word hypnos comes from the Greek word sleep, and it was coined by James Braid, in the 1700s. So it's not some spooky thing like the media make it out to be. So, but I stay away from that a little bit because this technique, once you get there, it's different. It's very different.
Okay, so how does it differ from traditional hypnotherapy?
Okay, well, typically hypnotherapy is suggestion and visualization, which a lot of people are familiar with. In fact, a lot of trainers and speakers all use that now. It's very commonplace. But that's therapist-oriented, where the therapist is going to read a script to you or give you a tape, and it's repeat, repetition, and it is surface. It's still above ground. Remember I talked about this part.
Getting down to those roots.
Right, and say you have a tree here, and you treat it with medication, you're still up here. That means you're in the conscious mind. Talk therapy, you're in the conscious mind. Hypnotherapy, you're about here, and it helps, but it's not permanent. In the Sidman solution, we crack that root and find out what was really the reason. And I can give you an example if you like.
Please, yeah.
Well,
I want to know how you crack that root.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's say, thank you for asking, that the symptom is shyness, which a lot of people have, and it's a simple one. It's a type of fear. What replaces fear? Love.
Oh.
So we have to find out where that fear came from. Where did you feel unloved? And we talked a little bit earlier off the air about self-esteem. A lot of this has to do with where did you chip away a little self-esteem so that you're not empowered. This is an empowering process, and when you're empowered, you have health and well-being. So we take that part, that shy part, and we follow the trail, and we use the visualization, which is usually abstract. Because we're entering that subconscious world, which is abstract.
In the book, you give examples from your practice, and I wonder, can you give an example, either illustrate shyness or whatever aspect you want, without giving the people's names?
Oh,
but,
sure.
But just kind of show exactly, what in their childhood, maybe, for instance, it was related to,
Yes. Okay, well, if you take that example of shyness and follow it back to the root cause, let's say at 2 years old they remember being yelled at, or scolded. Now, they get a feeling that they were a bad boy or bad girl, but then when we go back, we extract the true memory. The subconscious will never lie. So then we say, well, what really happened? And maybe that we ask that person, and we're just kind of working the memory, so to speak, and the real truth will come up. Like, well, what'd you do? Well, I got yelled at. And we might say, well, why'd you yell at me? Well, I don't know, you're making noise. Is that all?
Talking.
We were talking. Daddy was tired.
I'd be in trouble with that one.
Really, Daddy was tired, and he wanted he wanted some peace of mind coming home from work and just rest, and you were clanging the dishes and whatever, pots and pans, and he needed some peace of mind. And it might be something simple like that. Sometimes it's very serious. Maybe there was abuse or whatever. I remember one guy in particular that when he was a little child, his mother said, if you're not good all the time, your clothes are packed here at the door and we're sending you away. Wow. That child became so good that he never gave himself a day of rest, and his stress took its toll on his back. He ended up with chronic back problems and couldn't walk from that.
So that's an example of the physical connection. And you were able to treat that?
Yes, and actually, when I met him, he was with a cane, and now he's walking free. So once he let go of it, and that's this process, I call it freedom therapy too, kind of a sub, but you let it go, you really get free of that problem, you put wings on it, and then you restore yourself to what you were before. What were you before? I go, look over there, what do you see? Well, I see a happy little kid. Oh, you want that back? Okay, fine. And you say, you know, I claim that for myself. And then we find that when you go out into the real world, instead of, and really that's where the peace comes from, because we'll say, well, what do you see and what does it represent? And very often it'll say peace, happiness, joy, contentment, power, strength, security, a lot of really lovely things, instead of me reading a script. You see, so they're plugging into their higher self, which is really a very spiritual process, but I'm not making it so.
Now, let me ask you, on the one hand, I mean, I feel that if it works, it works. And for instance, even in medicine, let's say if you have a placebo, if the placebo works, I would say great. To play devil's advocate,
Sure.
let me ask you, what if that person is a hypochondriac? And so, you know, maybe, I don't know, it's all in their mind or something, and so you're not, you know, what do you say to that kind of argument?
Well, then there might be some benefit, a secondary benefit they're getting out of that. Maybe they're getting attention because, you know, they get to say they're sick and they don't have to go to work that day, and maybe their husband makes dinner for them, and, you know, they have to learn to take responsibility for themselves. So I would say that's a victim part. They see themselves as a victim. Part of my institute is to help people understand what they're doing. Sure. And it's part of the routine also. And I've trained people to do a complete history and hear the relationships in their lives and how that could have possibly been set up. Maybe they were ignored as a child. Maybe they were the middle child, which often happens. Or, you know, there are different reasons that could happen. So that's part of what we do, is examine that.
But in your opinion, though, these people really had genuine physical problems. It wasn't just...
Oh, yes. We have the documentation to prove it, the medical records, absolutely.
Now, you mentioned abuse. And again, these days, you know, unfortunately, that's becoming more widely known, and you wonder how widespread it is. But how common is it in your practice? I mean, in the book, for example, you give examples where it seems to be fairly frequent, where the parents or somebody was doing something pretty weird. I mean, either directly or indirect, or, you know, I mean, in varying degrees. But how common do you think that is?
Very common. It's 90% of my practice.
Wow.
I mean, you get some people that come in and they just have some simple little thing, but most people that seek help are at the end of the rope. And they're just like, I can't find help any other way. And when we discover what the root is there's been some kind of abuse, either intentional or unintentional. It could be, you know, that they had it at home, or that it could be the kids bullied them, or maybe they actually moved around a lot and nobody accepted them, so they feel bad about themselves. It's still a
so
kind
that
of
would be
abuse.
the unintentional, like just
that would
the
be
fact that the
unintentional.
family moved a lot or something.
Right,
Okay,
that
as
would be
opposed to...
unintentional. But very frequently, in fact, I can recall a week where I had every single client that had exactly the same molestation or something like that. Yeah.
And men and women.
Men and women. It's in the news now a lot more, but it's been going on for centuries. So now hopefully we'll do something about it.
And I remember the one case you mentioned where I think the mother, when the kid told the mother what was happening, I think the uncle or something, or stepfather, whatever it was, but then the mother like didn't want to hear about it or didn't want to. So is that common too? You hear that the parents don't want to, when they find out, they don't want to deal with it, or?
That can be one of the dynamics. Yeah, there's so many variables in this, but that's even worse because no one was there to support that person. So it happened and then nobody believed her, and then nobody supported her. So she really felt like there was nothing to give her any kind of solidity, right? But you can still get rid of it with this. We just say, I don't want to carry that pain anymore. So what we're really doing is taking the pain out of the memory, because it is what I call in the book actually a phantom foe. You probably have heard of a phantom limb, where someone's had a limb amputated, and yet they still have pain in that limb. Okay, it doesn't exist anymore. Recently they did in the Da Vinci Code, Tom Hanks had a phobia because when he was a child he fell down a well. Well, that's a phantom foe. He's not in a well anymore. But his reactions, his anxiety was the same as though he were really still there, just like a phantom limb. So you know that it no longer exists. It doesn't. So there's no harm in remembering it. Now we get to update that information, say, you know what, I'm letting go of that negative, and I want to restore myself.
So it's not that you deny that it happened, but you say that was in the past, or you know, that's a different way to...
There's no doubt it happened. You don't erase the memory. In fact, they tried to do some kind of drugs where they erased memory, and it was very controversial, but because they go, well, what if they committed a crime? They'll forget that.
And everything else.
Yeah, but this doesn't erase the memory. It only erases the pain from the memory, which is really different.
Well, another issue that you raise in the book along that line is whether or not it's good or healthy or whatever beneficial to, what do you say, dig up hidden memories or that sort of thing, which, you know.
Well, the only place I draw the line is people that are mentally ill, because if they're really not cognizant of something, I'm not the person for them. and nor is my institute. But usually people that see me, yeah, they're 99% of the people out there that have issues, that they're carrying that baggage around, that they're basically healthy, but they can't get unstuck from their problem. And they keep reacting the same way, and they go, well, I can't figure it out. I don't know why.
And this is all kinds of people from all walks of life?
Oh, yes. I have had patients from 6 years old to 96.
Oh.
Yeah. At 96, they don't care too much, but you never know. They might want to.
And maybe, I'm assuming that you'll say yes to this, and I think you even mentioned in the book, but you know, again, financial success is probably irrelevant to a certain extent too. That, you know, that in other words, just because you got the money doesn't mean you're not carrying around something.
Oh yeah, I work with CEOs. I work with corporations. I'm a consultant to corporations, and you'd be surprised how many executives go, they're going to find out about me that I'm really not. I don't deserve this position, and so their little inner insecurities can create a lot of problems within corporations as well. And then little kids, if they're younger than 6, they just hide behind the chair. They don't want to talk to you, you know. And they have to be old enough to really be able to relate. But in fact, I have a young boy that came to me whose father was at his rope's end because he tried MRIs with his child, he tried medical treatments, medicines, he was having pain all over his body, and when that beautiful little boy looked at me with his big blue eyes, he said, I just want to kill myself. And nobody could help him, and he is now fine. So I'm telling you, this works. It's some fear when he's separated from his parent, his mom, when he was born. So you go, well, gosh, but I can't remember birth. No, but your subconscious mind knows. It records everything. And once you let go of that fear and you replace it with security and love, you know, the problem disappears. It vanishes. Amazing.
We'll be right back with Dr. Jacqueline Sidman, author of Instant Inner Peace, right after this. We are back with Dr. Jacqueline Sidman today, telling you how to find inner peace. Well, I'm assuming that relationship issues are a big part of your practice or what you hear about.
Yes.
So what percentage of people are married couples that you work with? Is that a lot of what
I
you
don't
see,
I don't see them as couples, though. I see them as individuals because
okay.
everybody has their own stuff. So in fact, when they go to couples counseling, that's when the stuff comes forward, and I say, well, go find out what it is, then come see me.
Well, you talk in the book about controlling spouses and that sort of thing. Is that one of the main things that people...
Well, sure, because they're dynamics, and it's like people find the spouse because it's usually someone that the expression completes them. But really what that is that they want to be complete themselves. So it ends up being the very thing that really bugs them. And so what we want to do is complete them on their own, each partner, and then the relationships work.
And it's interesting because I think you mentioned that even people who may have had problems with their parents, you know, you'll say, well, tend to look for that same kind of person. You know,
A lot of times.
So.
Well, it's uncanny because it's sort of a subconscious thing. There's such a thing as an imago theory where they say you are seeking that to solve your inner problem, and it will end up persisting and persisting until you go inside. And when you go inside, you can solve it. Otherwise, it's the long, hard way because those defense mechanisms are in place.
Well, do you want to talk a bit about the defense mechanisms, which you mentioned earlier?
Yes. Okay. So let's just say that shyness and you remember somebody yelled at you, okay? The subconscious mind buries that feeling. You're too young to know what to say, and it automatically, according to whatever age you are, builds an automatic reaction, and it works. Like be quiet, you know, and you're not yelled at very much. That becomes imprinted. It's like hitting the save button on the computer. That's a way to be. That's a defense. It's keeping you away from feeling that unpleasant feeling. Now, you go through life, but it's like a door that shuts when you're 6, right? And you forget what it was. You forget where it came from, and you can't figure out, why am I still reacting? But the subconscious mind still is protecting you until the day you die, if you don't change it. And it causes all kinds of unwanted emotions because what happens is the situation kicks in that, you know, you feel somewhat threatened. It's a perceived threat and not a real threat. And you're nervous, your hands shake, you can't talk, your heart beats, and you go, I tried so hard to overcome this, but I can't overcome it. The only way to overcome it is to go back and release it the way I've described earlier. And then once you do, the defense mechanism, there's no need for it. You know what? Thank you for being there when I grew up, but I don't need you anymore. And you send it away. And really, you're in charge of you. The reason this process is so much fun is that when people are finished, and they're finished very quickly, it's a very short-term process, they're empowered. And they know they did it themselves. It's not like I'm doing it to them or my people that I've trained are doing it to. They made changes within themselves that they couldn't get there before. So now they have a chance to get there.
then you tell about the people who kick out their spouse or something as a result.
Well, I had one guy that was really shy and it was intimidating. I'll just tell you this, it was a very funny story. Because he was a teacher and he'd had a stroke and he came to me because he couldn't speak. He had a language problem. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I can't hear him. I don't know what he's saying. So I asked for the part of the mind that spoke perfectly to speak, and it spoke perfectly. I said, well, why are you stopping him from speaking perfectly? He said he's nervous. The nervousness caused the blood pressure to go up to the point of a stroke.
Wow.
Are we done? I just want to, can I just finish real quick? He got over it, and his wife said, can't I just control him a little bit?
Just a little bit.
No,
this is Dr. Jacqueline Sidman. Thank you very much for being here today,
Oh,
Dr.
it's a pleasure.
Sidman. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.